So first order of business, I know usually I'm the fun guy, right? I'm the normal guy at Sports Talk with Jay just referred me to, but I did some digging. I did some homework here, boys. Okay, I'm trying to
Oh, snap.
change the sleeves a little bit, and I
Proud of
did. Thank you, Dave. You're gonna enjoy this stuff. We got Gators by the numbers. Okay, I mean, come on, like you saw a little, you saw it.
I saw it.
You saw it. So this is the top 100 players in the PFF. So I kind of simplified it a little bit. None of them have, neither of us have one for the quarterback in top 100. I will say they're both in the top 120, and they're like three numbers away. I think 117 was Joe and 120 was Graham. I almost wanted to put that in there just because how close they were. We let it go. Running back, we have Montreal. They have Jabari Small, who is, and I put the little asterisk with number 2 because he is the number 2 ranked running back out of top 100. Lineman is where this thing gets nasty, and that's what I was referring to in the show with Sports Talk with Jay. This is total offense and defense, mind you. So they have total of 8 players on both sides of the ball. I think it's split pretty. I think it's 4 and 4. It might be 5 and 3, 5 on the defense and 4 on the offense. But I want to say it's split pretty evenly, and that concerns me a little bit because look, even though we went up against Utah, these guys have had some easy competition, which has a little bit to do with it. But this is an elite line. Trenches coming from Tennessee. So that kind of concerns me a little bit. From wide receiver, we had Eugene and Ricky Pearsall. They had one tight end. And this was something that we're going to get into a little bit later on, is the wide receiving core is not what it was last year. And maybe that's part of where Joe Milton is struggling a little bit, kind of what Anthony struggled with as well. There just isn't talent. Now, does he have accuracy problems? Sure. But we saw what Anthony did against the Jaguars with Indy. You put some NFL talent around him, he still makes his errant throws, but now you got guys that can catch those 100-mile-an-hour fastballs coming at you. And then DBs. Thought we were going to take them here? No. DBs, linebacker, safeties, they got 4. We've got 2. Now, I do have a little asterisk at the bottom there. Jake Slaughter for lineman was ranked 107. We slaughtered this man on his performance. McNeese say he really stepped up, and we're going to talk about the impact that's going to make because Kingsley's going to be back. So those things are starting to excite me just a little bit. But, Dave, you also did some digging as well, which you are the number guy. I'm going to go ahead and give myself a clap on the back because those are some great numbers. Some great numbers there, Dave. Thank you.
They are.
But what do you got for us, Davey?
All right, man. He talked about Joe Milton a little bit too, and of course, I always like doing kind of team stats, giving my opinion about everything. And I'm going to start with Jalen Wright, man. I mean, this guy, 233 yards. He's averaged 9.3 yards per carry. Ouch, that's a lot. 5.44 yards after contact. 10 runs of 10 plus yards or more. Combine that with Jabari Small, 162 yards, 6.2 yards per carry. 5 runs of 10 plus yards or more. I mean, this guy, Jalen Wright, he's already forced over 10 plus missed tackles. And I think Florida is going to give him a run for their money. And I was on the Mark Rogers show and I said, the big matchup that Florida is going to have to worry about is if that defensive line does give up a run. You've got Scooby, you got Shamar. And I think that's a good matchup to have. Scooby and Shamar have been playing lights out since the Utah game and McNeese State. And I think the big matchup will be, can Florida stop the run game? Because can Florida stop Tennessee's run game? Because Tennessee has to rely on the run game because Joe Milton's been struggling a lot. I think if Florida can come in there and stop their run game, force Joe Milton to throw the football, kind of like they did with Anthony Richardson last year, I think Florida bodes a little bit well because they do have the better backfield than Tennessee does. Now, Tennessee, on the other hand, and Florida, I'm worried about Florida's offensive line. Obviously, Florida's offensive line, they did not look great against Utah. They gave up 5 sacks. They didn't give up any sacks against McNeese, so that's good, but that's what you're supposed to do, like I said, against an inferior opponent. So, they returned that front 7 that you were just talking about, and I think you go back to last year, you've seen what they did when we had Osiris Torrance, Ethan White, and some of those other offensive linemen in there. And this offensive line does not have Osiris Torrance, Ethan White, and those guys. So, you get Kingsley back, which is a good thing, but you've really got to, if you're going to try to run the football, if you can gash them up the middle somehow, some way, with the linebacker being out for Tennessee, that's going to bode well. But if you can't do that, you're going to have to scheme up some designed run plays. You're going to have to. They talk about throwing passes to the running backs now in practice. We haven't seen anything like that before yet. So you're going to have to scheme around not being able to run it up the middle if you can't, like last year, and you're going to have to get some sort of run game going to give Graham Mertz some help because these guys are going to be coming for his head. They saw that Utah game. They saw how Graham Mertz struggled. I mean, he still threw for 333, but he never had a chance to toss it deep. and get an explosive play. So I think that's going to be the biggest matchup between Florida and Tennessee is mainly just the lines. I'm not worried about our backfield. I think Tennessee has to worry more about their backfield than we do. We have the more accomplished passer. If you want to go into quarterback passing stats right now, or you guys want to kind of comment on that part.
No, I guess my biggest concern for Florida is their willingness to give up the running game against Utah. In the traditional running game, not the RPOs and the things like that, but just the traditional running game where you're going to turn around and hand the ball off to what I believe are two of the best 1-2 punches at running back that are in college football. But it felt like Billy Napier didn't believe that they could run the football, and they could run it consecutively, and they could run it like successfully, right? You just didn't rely on it. 3rd and 2, you're still throwing the ball. If Florida can keep their running game going, if they can continue to turn around, hand the ball off, give it to one of what is it? Trayon Webb, I think, is your third guy.
Yeah,
and then, but then you've got Montrell, right, and ETN. But they just got away from it in the Utah game, and they didn't go back to it. They didn't trust it.
We never had a chance. I mean, being down as much as we were, and look, that was a big complaint. But it was 7-3, 14-3. 21-3 very quickly. And you're spot on, because we look, Mississippi State, they rushed for over 300 yards, the 3 of them. I mean, they just completely...
They can do it when the game's in the right
control.
place.
Yep.
Right? But if the game gets away from them, and if Florida has to go one-dimensional,
it's done.
I don't think that Florida's good enough to be a one-dimensional football team and beat Tennessee.
I think that's something... They're spot on with that, and... kind of referencing the Jaguars this past weekend, they looked a little sluggish against the Colts. However, they were able to pull out the W because they are the better team. They are an elite football team right now, and they found a way to win. In years past, they would have not been able to find a way to win. And yes, the Florida Gators, it concerns me because right now, again, it's a struggle for the identity. Their identity right now is to run the ball, but they have to be able to control it and be able to stay in their lane. If at any point that lane...
stay committed to it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, just like, even if you're getting 1 yard, 3 yards, 2 yards in a cloud of dust, then just believe in it.
Yeah.
And
if they have to deter from that game plan by any stretch, they're not a comeback catch up type. Now, they found themselves a lot last year in the catch up mode, but Anthony Richardson, I believe, gave them the ability to do that. I don't know if Graham can do that yet. We saw some shines in him against Utah that excited me. But what is he? Exactly what Sports Talk with Jay, which I've been preaching this entire time. He's Alex Smith. He is a game manager, which I don't mind. He can be Brock Purdy. That's fine. You put an elite defense around him, which I don't know if that Gator defense is starting to come into its own, right? You put Brock Purdy. You have a great running back duo, Christian McCaffrey. You can make things happen, but you have to keep the game under your control, and you have to basically...
It's got to be your game.
Yes.
It's got to be your game, because as soon as you lose control of the game and now you're behind by 2 scores and you're getting away from your running game,
we lose our identity, right?
You lose your identity.
Yeah.
And again, this is what goes back to what Judd was saying prior to the Utah game. If you don't know what you are, then you can't maximize on it. You can't be the best at it.
Sure.
And I think that's really kind of what this boils down to.
Go ahead, Dave.
I also think that, their line, like I said, one of their linebackers is out. They've missed a lot of tackles in the secondary. I think, like, if you honestly, if you cannot get to the secondary, we have not tried to test the edges at all in the run game. Like, go out to the edge, make their linebackers come after you. And I think that will bode a little bit well for Florida when they run the football, if they can't get up the middle. Now you look at, I was looking at Virginia's statistics the other day. They rushed for like 95 yards. Now, I don't know if they had their second or third string guys in there by the time of that Virginia game, but they rushed 95. If you don't count negative yardage from one of their quarterbacks, they rushed like 120 yards. And I mean, and still, like, you look at
Virginia. That's not Montrell Johnson, Trevor Etienne, and Trayon Webb.
Right.
So maybe there is a weakness on that defensive line, or maybe they had found a way to run the football. And Florida obviously needs to look at the film and see how they did that. But like, they struggled last year doing it. So I would say that, more edge rush. I mean, like, I would just love to see them test the edge, because when they get to the secondary, man, I mean, it's
No,
you've
yeah,
seen
well,
two.
and
hold
once
on,
they
real
get past
quick, let me
the-
go. To be fair, though,
Go.
to your point about how Florida doesn't have the identity to come back and win the football game, Tennessee hasn't shown me that this year either. If they're down, if they're struggling a little bit, Joe Milton struggled. I mean, I mentioned this during we were watching the Virginia game, and we were watching the Virginia game together. I was like, my goodness, if Virginia could just figure out how to play football for 5 minutes, this could be a football game. But Milton and Tennessee were able to make mistakes and not have any repercussions of it. Florida made a couple of tremendous errors, and it backfired because they were playing a great team that capitalized on that. Tennessee has not played a great team that's been able to capitalize on their mistakes. I'm not saying they're going to make the same mistakes again, but if we can be the team that capitalizes on it and limit our mistakes, I think both teams are in the same boat, and both teams right now are in a place of what is your identity? Are you going to be an air raid attack like you were prior? Is Joe Milton going to figure it out? Because, and honestly, with an elite defense as well, because they're there, but their cornerback play, we're not quite sure yet. They've got great linebacker play and great safety play, but wide receivers are not what they were last year. So, look, I think there's a lot of questions unknown. And again, after week 1 on Thursday, nobody felt this way. This was not the feeling of the conversation
vibe,
in the room. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to go to quarterback stats here too. Through 2 games, obviously, I think Graham Mertz obviously has the better quarterback stats than Joe Milton so far. He's got a 72.6% completion rating. He's passed for 526. He's averaged 8.5 yards per passing attempt. He's thrown a pick, but we know how that pick went. 2 total passing touchdowns. Good time to throw 2.48. Joe Milton, 2 games, 66.7% completion rating, pretty good. 424 yards, 6.7 yards per passing attempt, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. His time to throw is just about around where Graham Mertz is. But here's the kicker here. Joe Milton on 0 to 9 yard passes, 109 yards, 10 to 19 yards, 33% completion rating, 55 yards. 20 plus yard passes, 22.2% completion rating, 61 yards. 200 of Joe Milton's 424 yards passing were behind the line of scrimmage. So there was a lot of yards after the catch, a lot of behind the line of scrimmage passes. So you take that away, not really impressive. Now you go to Graham Mertz, his stats are a little bit more spread out. 0 to 9 yard passes, 16 to 17, 94.1% completion rating, 118 yards. 10 to 19 yard passes, 60% completion rating, 117 yards. 20 plus yard passes, 4 for 9, 44.4% completion rating for 133 yards. 158 of his yards have been behind the line of scrimmage. So his yardage is more spread out, more than Joe Milton's is. And I think that's what shows that Graham Mertz has been able to capitalize on some of those, I guess, longer passes that Joe Milton really hasn't. And I think he's been the more accurate quarterback so far.
Look, I think we saw it too on Monday night with Josh Allen. The guy can throw the ball 600 feet down the football field, but I mean, what does that do if you're going to throw it to the other football team, right? And look, I think that's something that Milton, could he figure it out week 3? 100%. And I think if they do, Tennessee is going to be the real deal and a real threat because the rest of it's clicking, which I feel like last year they were clicking at the quarterback position, wide receiver position, but everything else was kind of, missing. And now they've flopped the page a little bit, but being in the swamp is going to be huge and it's going to be exciting. But that's numbers, the Gators by the numbers.